You're now listening to the Something Good Podcast Network. Please press any key to continue.
A kiss, as defined by Dan Webster, is something pleasing, a caress, a gentle touch. But there's another kiss that isn't in Webster's.
Hey world, we're kids!
Some critics say they don't make music, they just make noise.
Yeah, Kiss sucks!
Kiss implies the extreme in the theatrics on stage, utilizing fire and smoke and bizarre costumes, and the ever-consistent, constant concealment of their true identities.
Speaking of which, Kiss is going to have its own comic book soon.
Take Kiss with you. It's fun. Show your friends and be the first. Now.
Oh my God, no time to turn!
Welcome once again to No Time to Turn, a Kiss nerd podcast.
That's the nerd alarm. The nerd alert.
As always, I'm joined by Alex and Cap from the Something Good For You podcast.
What's up, everybody?
I'm Russ, and we have been tracking the history of Kiss, album by album, year by year. Just talking about stuff and trying to figure out what's going on between the official narrative and probably what might not be always acknowledged. But we're probably going to get a lot of stuff wrong. But that's part of the fun of doing this. We don't claim to be experts. We have been rolling pretty hard here.
Oh yeah,
we I guess came out of the rock and roll over cycle.
Yep, and that wrapped up. Let's see, the recording cycle for Rock and Roll Over. So they finished that in October of '76 and released that in November, and we're getting into 1977 at this point.
We toured that. We talked about that on the last episode. They wound up the Rock and Roll Over tour in Tokyo, Japan, on April 4th.
Right, with all of the shenanigans. Well, not shenanigans. All the plane stories and what went wrong when they landed and everything too.
Yeah. It was some. But that was a major, milestone moment in the career of the band. But coming into the Love Gun now, they're I guess they've spent really only a month, basically the month of April. I guess they've returned home before returning to the studio on May 2nd, according to the notes I have.
Yep.
They are not at Electric Lady. They're at the record plant in New York City with Eddie Kramer. I don't think he was real keen on that studio because he had helped build the Electric Lady studio. But I don't know the rationale or reasoning that put us in the.
I was about to ask.
I said us like we were there.
Yes.
We're no different than football fans, and when football fans, like when a team wins, we won. So.
Rah, rah, rah.
Right.
Roll all night.
Go Balls, we beat Bama. We beat Bama. Me, not me physically, but, the royal we.
There doesn't seem to be, I cannot, find a lot of information about the actual recording process on this record.
I know it. That's what we were kind of talking about that leading up to us recording, is that there's not a whole lot of studio information with Love Gun.
Everything that I've seen basically just says that it went smoothly, and then the only other bit of recording information that I've ran into was I found some stuff talking about how they went over budget.
Yeah, they went over budget by about $20,000 from what I understand. So this album cost $100,000 to produce, which was a pretty large sum in that time.
Yeah,
but I think that was becoming
today even.
I don't think so much today. Maybe today. I don't know. I just know that it doesn't sound like they spent $100,000 on it to me. I think overall this whole album sounds very thin compared to Rock and Roll Over.
I'd agree with that.
This sounds more almost like it almost jumps back to the kind of thin sound of Dressed to Kill, but it lacks the punch that Dressed to Kill had.
And part of that might be with the place they chose to record it too. They didn't have the big open spaces that they had for Rock and Roll Over.
Yeah,
I don't know if I would agree with the with it not having as much bite as Rock and Roll Over. Dressed to Kill, because Dressed to Kill to me still feels way more thin than Love Gun. Love Gun to me still has a certain amount of warmth. I mean, even from the intro of I Stole Your Love, the fuzz that's on Paul's guitar has a certain warmth to it, where Dressed to Kill was a lot more cut, dry, and just kind of attacky.
Well, let's just jump on this and let's just run this song by song. Is that cool with you guys?
Sounds good to me.
Since we don't have a lot to go with, and you're starting right at a perfect point there.
Right.
Well, no, I was more or less just commenting on recording stuff. There, I feel like we can still talk a little bit more on that, but that was just at least my opinion of like the Sonics overall. Is maybe they didn't. It doesn't sound like they spent that much money on it that they did.
Well, I disagree. I think that going into like I said, we'll just start.
Okay.
I Stole Your Love. I mean, that was something that jumped out. I listened closely, and and to be fair, I'm comparing it again to Rock and Roll Over, but I'm also kind of going ahead of the curve here, and I'm comparing it to what we'll get to on another episode, which is Paul's solo album. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm starting to notice a very distinctive style to the way Paul plays. Mm-hmm. But on this, the guitar has really not got the as much, I guess, crunch, distortion, or whatever as it did on. The guitars sound really fat and powerful on Rock and Roll Over, and here it's more of kind of a. And I'm saying I can tell it's intentionally so. It just it has a cleaner sound.
A little bit, yeah. Does it? Was the record plant where they recorded the first album too? Mm-mm. With the record plant in New York City, what's that normally associated with outside of this record? Because I can't think of any other examples.
1,000 records. I mean, it's just a bunch. But there was also a West Coast record plant too.
Okay.
But and I think that's the more famous or more notable of the two. But at any rate, this song is a killer song. Any which way you turn it. I Stole Your Love, I think, is just a great riff. I think it has and I think it was intentionally so. I might have read this somewhere because it's in my head, but the riff kind of lifts from Deep Purple's Burn.
I can hear that.
And obviously, if you're going to steal from the greats, and
exactly.
And we've talked about before how Paul is a stylist. He can take other people's ideas and tear them up and reassemble them into his own very well, and he does that on a couple of tracks on this album. But
and I can picture the way you play "I Stole Your Love" as opposed to how like Richie Blackmore would play "Burn." Because I'm trying to figure out how to play both riffs, and there's a lot of.
You being a guitar player would notice that before I would, but. I think this it's a strong lead track on this album. I think it's a great song. I think this is Peter Criss's best recorded moment. I think the drum track on this is really kind of overlooked and underrated. If you really pay attention to what he's doing some pretty cool stuff.
Oh yeah, it falls right back to that jazz vibe.
Yeah, how sophisticated any of this is, I can't say, but I mean, it just sounds cool. He's got
it's an attitude.
He's he rolls in on the toms on the opening riff, and then he's doing the double slap in between the verses. I needed someone, you needed someone too, but
Yep. And I love Paul's vocal on it too. Speaking of attitude,
yeah, and it's got that, the class. Again, one thing I like about Paul Stanley's vocal in this era is it's just so sassy and strong, and it's not what he would try to do in the 80s, where it became more almost, for lack of a better term, operatic. A proper quote unquote singer. Here he's not that. He's a good singer. He's got a lot of soulful emotion in it. It's that, like you said, sassy kind of thing. Mm-hmm. This is also very similar to I Want You. It's got the trade-off lead. It starts with Paul and goes into Ace.
Yep.
So it almost harkens back to Rock and Roll Over in that sense. But I just think this might be the best song on the album.
Comes right out the gate super strong like that.
It's really good. And I'm not saying that the guitars sound bad by saying they don't have the same presence. It may be that if to deliver that at its maximum punch, you have to have it at a certain, they have to come out at a certain way. I don't know. I'm not,
Maybe the room. It's a whole lot of factors with these scenarios.
I mean, I just think overall, I think it could have probably still, even in the way that the guitars are set, if they're not as fuzzed out, if they're not as distorted, that it could have had I keep harking back to Rock and Roll Over. Rock and Roll Over, I think, is their best sounding album sonically.
I agree with that too.
And see, for me at least, I've kind of teased it on the show off and on. It's like Love Gun, top to bottom, is probably my number one favorite record.
Mm-hmm.
Like from album cover to costume and stage design, even down to production. And I'm curious if one of the things you're hearing is the acoustic. Because one of the things they really started implementing a lot on this record even was acoustic guitars throughout the whole record, kind of backing it up. And in I Stole Your Love, specifically after it comes out of the chorus and it's that alternate backup, the stole your love. During that part, you hear the acoustic a little bit more present. So I wonder if you're just catching a little bit of the frequencies of that, and that's what's leading to feeling like it's a bit more of a cleaner guitar tone.
Well, I mean, for you, it stands to reason you would be able to hear it more if the electrics are cleaner. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I just think.
But no, for me though, I Stole Your Love. No, actually, probably my number one Paul song for like official Kiss releases.
This is a great one. It's not, I don't think my number one Paul song, of course, is Mr. Speed, but
yeah,
that might be my number one Kiss song, period. But this was a strong one. I love this song. I think it's always been they use it as a set opener in the ensuing tour, but this is a strong track. I think that I don't know. I think that Peter's really driving the whole thing here.
Oh, totally.
I think it drives it more than anyone probably recognizes, just for the fact that, I do think the guitars sound so kind of thin. But this is my complaint over the whole album as far as the sound of the guitars and stuff. It doesn't have that muscled up presence that Rock and Roll Over had. And I wonder if that was a conscious decision to have a more commercial appeal.
I don't think it was a conscious decision for commercial appeal. I think it was ego and strong arming from Paul, because I noticed a lot of sonic similarities between this and Paul's solo album. And there was also notes that I ran across that was saying that Kramer was recommending like Peter sing one or two of Paul's songs, and Paul just would not even let that come to be.
That was
so it does sound like, since everyone's egos were getting boosted up a little bit more, that Paul may have had a bit more control over the overall sonics if we just compare it to his record.
That makes sense, because we talk about Rock and Roll Over and how big the guitar sounds were on that, and I think that kind of translates more so into Ace's record, but we'll probably get into all those details whenever we cover that era as well.
Well, let's keep it rolling here. We'll look at Christine 16, a song that could not be done today.
No, a song that in retrospect probably doesn't age well, but are we going to throw out the it was different in the 70s
it was
caveat?
Different in the 70s.
That's all you can do.
Well, it absolutely was different in the 70s. It was a different time. It was a different era with a whole different vibe. And I mean, if you look at the Los Angeles groupie scene of the early 70s, it's like these are all
teenagers,
young teenage girls, and I don't know that the appeal to the rock stars is that they were so young, so much as it was the opposite. It was that they were so young yet womanly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
And that was probably part of the deal. But regardless, this song, I mean, here we go. We got Humbert and Lolita here, basically. The lyrics on this song, I mean, I can't listen to it and not laugh.
I know it.
Especially
it's just so...
The talky bit right before the solo.
Yeah, I don't usually say things... I mean, just right, the first line. I don't usually say things like this to girls your age.
Like, that alone just kind of sends shivers up my spine. You're like, please, shut up.
Even as a teenager, just hearing it for the first time, just went like, that's weird.
But then it gets even better. But when I saw you coming out of school that day,
Meanwhile,
Jesus Christ, you're like riding, like leering around the school. It's like, are you in a white van with a trench coat on?
No.
Jesus Christ.
Just picture Gene Simmons in full costume and makes when it's Batwings just in a school hallway with a backpack or some shit like that.
No, he's not.
Like even Gene recognizes that's a weird line now, because I think during like the Rock the Nation tour or something they did in like the mid 2000s, they were playing it live.
They changed the talk bit.
When it gets to the talking bit, he was like, I usually don't say things like this to girls your age, but when I saw you, oh yeah, I had to have you. It's like he did change it a little bit.
Like that somehow softens the fact that the whole song is still about a 16-year-old.
Look, in my opinion, cutting out the line, when I saw you coming out of school that day, I knew I had to have you. To me, it does soften it a little bit.
No, it doesn't. No.
I'm just hearing everybody.
Christine, 16, not even, no, I mean, you could.
Hey, Chuck Berry did it first. Sweet little 16.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there you go. I'm sure that had an influence in it. Christine 16 is a cool coupling, and it is a great pop song. This is.
Great little piano bits in it. It's just catchy.
Gene's just got that knack. He's got that Beatle influence and has a knack to write a catchy pop song. I think that's his strength really as a songwriter. And I mean, he comes up with this off the wall stuff lyrically, but musically he can stitch together a cool little snappy pop song.
This was awkward live when they do it too, because it's just Gene going bump. But up with no piano, but up.
Yeah, but interestingly, it was the first single off the album, and it peaks at 25 according to the information I have. I'm surprised it didn't do better. It seems like it would have been I don't know though. I mean, the times being different.
To jump ahead just a little bit, if we're just talking about first singles though, I feel like if Tomorrow and Tonight had been the first single.
Yeah, don't jump ahead.
Okay,
We're going to get there. I'm totally on point with you, dude.
Okay.
But this is one of the songs he famously demoed with Van Halen brothers.
Yes.
Yep.
Have y'all ever heard the demo of this?
I haven't. Eddie Van Halen plays that solo exactly, with that same notation too.
Yeah, it's very much the exact same thing, and it doesn't sound like the Van Halen brothers what you would expect, because you have it in your head a particular way, and I don't know if they were playing to his direction.
Had to. They had to have, because
you don't know. I mean, it's hard to say.
I mean, well, even take it, this way, Cap. I mean, if someone were to look at, your bass playing, say you played bass with the Kelsey Ryan band instead of playing guitar. If you played bass with that and then looked at the fill-ins bass stuff, it might be a little bit hard for them to determine, which way is Cap truly a bass player in, because it's such different styles.
Right.
I think they were just trying to play to serve the song, this unwritten song that this guy, Gene Simmons from Kiss, has given us the privilege to help co-write with them.
That might be true too.
Well, they don't get co-write credit. They just help him. That's why I'm saying if it's under his direction, I mean, they don't. There's no co-write credit here, so
they didn't meander at all. And say what you want about Van Halen, they know melody.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Gene
so
sure
does
does.
Gene though. This is Gene's song. I mean, this is clearly. I think this is all Gene. So.
Yeah.
I suspect that demo was probably largely under his direction, including the solo part, and he just carried over and replicated it in the actual recording for the Love Gun album.
It's Eddie Kramer on the pianos too.
Yeah,
and it's also funny because we get it sampled in Funky Cold Medina.
Yep, it popped up, and I can remember when that was a hit, and I think I was probably the only one in the world I wasn't the only one in the world, but I know it seemed like I was the only one in the world at the time that knew what that was, because by that point Kiss had not, they weren't cool anymore.
And it was a cool little bit because it's the bop, bop, ba-dum, pop, pop, pop.
Yeah.
And it includes like the little drum bit too. So
and my ears pricked up right away. I was like, hey! I don't remember how old I was. I was a teenager, but I'm like going, that's Kiss.
I remember.
And the kids at school were like, we don't care.
Yeah. Of course, I wasn't old enough, when the song first came out, but I remember first making that connection, like hearing it, paying attention to it, and hearing it and being like, Mom,
Yeah.
Mom, did you know? She's
Yeah.
like, yes,
Yeah.
I know.
I'm sure they didn't see a penny of it either.
Oh, who knows? I don't know. I doubt it. Got Love for Sale.
Yes.
Originally titled Have Love Will Travel, which is what they're singing in the chorus.
I
Yeah.
think that's a better title.
It probably is, but I don't think this is that great of a song. I mean, I like it, but all I can think of when I hear it is, again, Sleazy Gene, but I Got Love for Sale. I think of like Dan Aykroyd on Saturday Night Live, Fred Garvin, male prostitute.
Right. It's kind of like, we talk about...
like how much business are you getting there, buddy? I don't get it. It's just corny. It's corny to the point. Like Christine 16 is corny, but it's funny in that kind of dark way that you're like, you almost feel guilty for laughing at now,
Right.
But all things being even in its context, it's like Lolita. I mean, it's darkly humorous, Got Love for Sale is just
silly.
It's sleazy to the point where it's not even, I don't know, but
I think the weakest bit in the song is the lyrics, because musically, I think it's right on point. I think it's a great little guitar riff. Another great example of them using the acoustic layers, for the
But and when I hear stuff like that, and I was gonna reference this in later tracks here, but stuff like that to me seems like that's stuff they learned under Ezrin.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it would have served better under his direction, his production. I just think it would have. There's another example where it just doesn't. It sounds like. It just doesn't have that same kind of resonance. And I'm also looking at like albums by their contemporaries at the time. Like if you look at like Aerosmith's Rocks, that album's just got this great shimmer across it. And it just sounds so great and it's so well done. And I'm like, how do you got that coming out at the same time and hear what you're doing and going, gee, that's not quite the same, and I understand it's different musicianship and what have you. I'm taking all that into account, but just the production value here, it just seems like it could have been so much more rich and full, and it's just very tight and dry.
It's very interesting.
And it doesn't, to me, I just think it's this whole album sounds production wise like a step backwards, but again, we're talking about one of their seminal albums. This is a very big album for them, but
kind of thinking on a little bit more, like just trying to process and think, because I'm just trying to mentally compare, the sonics between like Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun. I think what happened is Rock and Roll Over almost still has a bit of a punk rock mentality to the sound, if that makes any sense. Even though they had the really big drums and stuff like that, the guitars were basically mixed in a way that almost kind of is reminiscent of, the contemporary, underground rock and roll records at the time. This one almost feels a lot more smoothed out and like a unit, if that makes any sense. Where it's like the guitars don't ever overbear the drums and the bass never gets in the way of the vocal. Where sometimes in Rock and Roll Over, a guitar could override some drums or a bass line could get lost in the mix somewhere.
I think that's why I think that all of this is done with commercial consideration. I don't doubt that for a second.
What,
I mean,
is it commercial consideration or just like trying,
absolutely,
or just like progressing the sound even more?
Well, there's a little bit of both, I'm sure, but I mean, they had their eye on the prize. I mean, Kiss was definitely striving for commercial acceptance. It's not a.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying they weren't. I'm just curious to think if it went all the way down to the production of the record.
Well, like you were talking about, it was this is the era of Super Kiss.
Well, not quite,
but starting to become Super Kiss.
But I think that they were looking at it from like, okay, Destroyer was at the time, we talked about this in the previous episode, that Destroyer seemed like too much of an anomaly. It was too left field. So let's go back to our meat and potatoes roots. But that proved to be almost too forceful and too strong to find any ground in radio.
And there's hardly
now they're trying to do like a balance point where they're doing something that has a commercial vibe that isn't going to be too
right.
So it's like they're they're kind of not flexing their muscle as much as they're able,
right? Because there's
in a concession towards having a commercial appeal. Now we that doesn't necessarily relate to "Got Love for Sale," but you made a point about those little kind of
the acoustic guitars,
the acoustic things and stuff. And
so
I you know, that's some cool stuff in that track. I think I agree with you musically, but I think given the demos that exist, I think there were other tracks that could have been considered for this that would have been a better fit for the album.
Interesting. But yeah, there's more bells and whistles on this album overall than say Rock and Roll Over for sure too.
Yeah, there's stuff that's going on, but it just doesn't sound quite as big.
Oh, I think it sounds big. I'll have to always. I'm not trying to argue. It's just I can't let that fly. I can't let those words flow without me saying something. It just this record just feels so big and like bombastic to me. I mean, especially when we get over to something like Almost Human. When that intro kicks in. I mean, it's like that's huge. It is. It's a big record. I mean,
it's got. I think we'll get to that. In a minute.
Let's go to Shock Me because I feel like that's a good example of the heavy guitar tones.
I think this has got more crunch than some of the other tracks. It's certainly got more crunch than I Stole Your Love does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not nearly
there's
as many.
kind of
I was going to say no bells and whistles on this track really, other than like say background vocals and stuff.
Yeah, I mean this is Ace stepping up, literally into the spotlight. His first recorded vocal with the band.
Yep.
It's got a great drum track in this as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of my all-time favorite drum performances that Peter does. Just that little ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. I love that.
I mean, there in this, I'm sure, is pretty much all. I mean, I might be wrong, but I'm assuming that in the recording process, this is pretty much all Ace and Peter.
And I think that makes sense because especially since you're saying the guitars had a bit more crunch on this one, we do know that Paul starts I Stole Your Love.
Yeah.
So I think he may have a bit more of that muted guitar tone where Ace still comes in with that more kind of crunch.
Yeah. And, Ace worked really well. Obviously, we know now with Eddie Kramer, he enjoyed the partnership they had. And I'm sure that fed into the success of this as well. I mean, this could have potentially been a not strong song. Some of the lyrics are a little corny. That's fine. Whatever. It doesn't matter.
And especially because Ace, I mean, as much as we love him, call a spade, he's not a good vocalist, but he does great with his vocals.
Right. Well, I mean, he doesn't have to be. He's got to be Ace.
Yep.
I think when he applies himself, anything Ace wants to do, he can do. I mean, in the context of being Ace Frehley.
Right.
But that leads into the whole thing, the whole entire Kiss thing. It's like I had a friend of mine who saw Kiss this week, and he took his girlfriend, and he was saying that she got it.
Yeah.
And hello, Woodsy. And so I was like, yeah, in order to get Kiss, you got to kind of contextualize it. And then you also got to acknowledge, though, that Kiss only exists in their own context. If you try to apply that context to other bands or other bands try to apply that context to them, it just doesn't really fit.
And it's weird how that works.
And it's weird. I mean, there's so few bands that can do that. And that's what makes this band special, particularly in this era. And it also makes the individual components of this band special in this era. And in this case, Ace, I don't know that a song like Shock Me would have worked. And, prior, Gene had sung Ace's songs. I can't see Gene singing this song.
No.
It just, I don't know why. It just doesn't seem to fit to me. But then again, had he done it,
Bite me.
Well, I'm just saying, if had he done it, we might not have known any different, and we wouldn't be able to say that. But, this becomes Ace's signature song more so than anything he has written before, simply because he had the lead vocal on it.
Yep.
And now, do we believe the urban legend of he had to lay on his back with the lights off in order to do his vocal take?
That may be true. I seem like I read somewhere in making my notes for this that might be conflated with other events.
Okay.
I don't know. He brings
him
that up.
recording in something else, but
He brings that up in his memoirs, though.
yeah, but I don't.
I know it.
That's why I also said legend.
I'm sure.
If
that
Ace looked you right in the eyes and said, "Yeah," I'd still be saying, "So the legend of
right." Well, I'm sure that probably happened at some point, but and I don't see that as being that strange of a.
Oh, it's not.
idea,
It's still
but
just an interesting little tidbit in my
I
eyes.
think that with stuff like that, I'd rather believe the myth. Because the myth is always probably going to exceed the reality. But,
Right.
Okay, well let's. Anything else to add to
Great solo. Great solo.
Of course, it's going to be because he's got free reign on it. I don't think this is Ace's best lead break on this album.
Not best, but it's still a great.
It is a good solo.
I always hear the the kick in with it, with like what Cap was talking about, that little drum skip bit, that little walk up to it, and the bends and shit. That's one of those singable Ace
it's like
solos.
The two of them working together, and it seems like you feel that kind of it's like that kind of band thing that they're working together, and there's not a lot of that in Kiss. I don't think that.
And some of the playing is just kind of fucked up too, in a way. It's very unorthodox. Even the riff, it kind of does like the da 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 da, like that part. He has to pull on that top string to nail it like that, which is like, who does that?
Yeah, well, Ace does.
Frehley
does. He does.
And
that's killer.
And that part in the solo where it's just like it just kind of goes like again. It's like nobody else would have come up with that either. I don't think.
Moving on here, Tomorrow and Tonight. Paul knocks this one out of the park.
Now, the reason I didn't say this was my number one favorite Paul song, this might be my number two, but the reason being is I can take that step back and go, okay, the lyrics are a little bit dumb, like it is a little on the nose, but oh my god, is this not a fun song?
It's a great song, and
I love it.
I don't understand why this wasn't a single.
I don't, especially for 1977.
Yeah, it just seems like this would have been. It's danceable. Without being, it's not in any way disco.
But it could have been a flagship tune for Casablanca at the time too, I think.
Yeah, but it would have fit right in. I think they could.
It's a hip shaking, hand clapping, backup singing, good time.
It's R&B again. The R&B influence. Paul pulls a lot from R&B, and we've talked about this on other episodes, and this really illustrates it. Probably more so than any other song in their canon. This is he acknowledges the influence of Mott the Hoople's Golden Age of Rock and Roll on this, the kind of the structure of it. And I can see that. That's pretty obvious now. When you hear it, you make that conscious connection. Otherwise, I never would have thought of that.
Or like the Rolling Stones, "Can't You Hear Me Knocking?" That slidey riff that he does.
That who knows? But I just don't understand why this wasn't released as a single.
No, I agree.
And it seems like it would have been a pretty huge. And this is one of the few songs where they've got outside backing vocals.
Mm-hmm. And I think the song also really shines and shows what great musician work when you listen to the deluxe edition that came out in 2018. There's a Tomorrow and Tonight instrumental demo near the end of that, and you can really hear exactly what the guitars are playing and like the different things. And it's like, damn, you can tell they put some songwriting time into this track.
The drum track on that demo is like really weird too. It kind of throws you off at first if you've heard the original Tomorrow and Tonight a bunch.
Yeah.
Well, the demo on Tomorrow and Tonight, it sounds like it was very much in place. There's not a variation to the finished track. It makes me wonder who's playing on the demo.
Well, I'd say it's very much like the next song's demo.
Okay. Well, the title track, Love Gun.
Yes.
Yeah. I still love it.
I'm not a fan of this song.
I'm not either. I
still like it's like a lot of this. It's silly, but I love it. I love the arrangement of it.
I like the arrangement. I like musically. There's some cool stuff going on here, and this goes into what I was talking about, Ace's big moment on this is on the descending end.
No, the ending.
descending, right.
It's just it's a very simple thing, but it works really well, and just the way he's playing that whole lead across the end. But they've got it covered under the chorus,
and they get rid of that in the live versions, which I've always loved about the live versions.
It just but this whole song, I mean, it's a tired ripoff of the Albert King song. I guess it was written by Booker T and the MGs, if I've got that correct. But popularized by Albert King, and it was stolen by every band in the world, and the carcass had been already picked apart, and now all that's left are the bones, and that's what they're trying to make this song out of. And I mean, okay, you can always flesh out the bones, I guess, but man, I mean,
for those that
it's been done and done yet again, you know. I mean,
for those that might not know, what Albert King song you were alluding to?
The Hunter.
Okay, yeah, very much so.
And you know, it's just like almost like a bubblegum version of The Hunter. And I don't know, man. I just think, you know,
I got you in the sights of my gun and
he's
everything.
He's put together this great instrumental track, but he doesn't have a lyric for it, and the lyrics are just dumb. They're just, I mean, girl, I'll make you feel okay. That's the best you can come up with. I mean, you know, I say this only because again, Tomorrow and Tonight. I mean, it might have some dopey lyrics, but it's still pretty cool and clever in the way he puts his stuff together.
I Stole Your Love is really well written lyrically,
and it's almost like the lyrics were an afterthought on this song, and somehow it shined out enough that they decided that this is the title track. None of this makes sense to me now. I mean, as a little kid, you don't think about this, but you know, now being a full-blown nerd, and I can go full nerd on this doesn't make sense to me. I don't think this is the strongest. It's the second weakest song on the album to me. Well, again, maybe not.
I was going to say,
you know, again, the instrumental track is great. As far as the music itself, the construction of it,
I will say,
drum part,
amazing intro to a song. Just that single note.
I want to know. Who created that part?
I have to say it's Paul, and the reason I think it's Paul is because he attributes one of the, maybe you can count on one hand how many times Paul says something negative about himself. One of the things that he does say around that time is that he was getting bad demoitis, which would mean that he would go to like Electric Lady and cut like these super produced demos, bring it to the band, and then get all pissy if they wanted to
alter it. Yeah,
so that's why the demo for this song sounds very fucking similar to the main one that came out. So I think that Paul's ego was just really hitting hard at this time.
I don't even know if I guess you could say ego, but I mean, if you got a clear vision, you got to.
I've been there too.
Ego and vision are interlinked, but you know, if you've got a very strong vision and a very clear vision of what it is you're trying to accomplish.
But if it's a song like this that we also just spent the past couple minutes on saying it felt like that strong or that fleshed out in comparison
I think musically
to others.
It did, you know.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And you know, we referenced the deluxe edition that came out, and it had the demos on it.
It has there's one where Paul's kind of like explaining how
to
play it and
completely
everything
unnecessary.
too.
But the actual demo to me has more presence on the guitars. Those octave chords that he shows in the thing, they soar greater than on the finished track. You can hear it; it's a lot more pronounced on the demo. I think. You know, I don't know why it doesn't seem to be as noticeable on the finished track.
Those little effects you're talking about, you know what it reminds me of? The effects he had on Tonight You Belong to Me. Think about the chorus, the kind of vibe he had on the guitars with that.
There's he's got the sustained guitar notes. Yeah, that's something that's very much a Paul thing that you find that. I'm talking about just those kind of the octave notes though in the I don't know what the part. I'm not going to sing it, but he shows it. No, he shows it in that demo track or in the teaching track or whatever, and then you hear it in the demo, and you hear it very clear. But then you go to the actual album track, and it's not as pronounced.
I know which part you're talking about.
It's an E minor.
But yeah, those sustain notes that he's doing underneath it, and that's real pronounced on the demo track that isn't on the album track. Those single sustain notes, and he does that a lot. Like you said on Tonight You Belong to Me, I noticed that right away. It jumped off.
And to give Ace Frehley his full credit, the ascending and descending guitar riff is totally Ace, because that wasn't in the demo.
Ace has really put some cool stuff on this, and I get the way it's all structured. It makes sense, but I they did the remix later on the Smashes Trashes and Hit or whatever it's called. We'll reach that one day
eventually.
But on the remix of that, that's one of the strengths of that one remix, is that when he hits to that part, it takes all that vocal away, and all you get is the guitar all the way out. And that,
that's the part you're waiting for.
And it's such a great guitar track. I mean, Ace was such a great guitar player. I mean, no, he wasn't Eddie Van Halen, but Eddie Van Halen couldn't play Ace Frehley.
Exactly.
Except for Christine 16.
Except for
Damn! Out of all the times we rip on Van Halen, he actually gets a really good one in on us.
Touché.
Good one, God. That was good.
There's so many.
I'm just saying,
great
though,
Ace moments here.
My point of this is to say is, like, people like to argue about the musicianship and skill of any given musician, and I don't think that you miss the point. It's like, Keith Moon was not a great technical drummer, but he was the greatest rock and roll drummer. Because he was so manic and wild, and rock and roll is about the feel. It's not about the technical proficiency. And once you get to that point where you're focusing on the technical proficiency and the musicianship and stuff, you've lost your balls. You might as well just go home.
Dude, we could do a whole series on how much of a fucked up soup the Who was.
And when I say balls, that's not even a sexist thing, because I mean, if you got to put it as to the balls of your feet, that's fine too, because to me, like, the Runaways have more balls than, say, Dream Theater.
Yeah,
I'd agree with that.
People want to snidely go, they're teenage girls, they couldn't even play. Yeah, you know what? They still rocked a lot fucking harder than the shit you like, so shut the fuck up.
They could hang harder than you could.
Yeah. But moving right along here, we go into Peter's obligatory moment.
Right. This feels like the most obligatory Peter Criss tune,
really?
even outside of Baby Driver from the last record.
Well, I love Baby Driver. We talked about that in the Rock and Roll Over episode, and I think it's a underrated track, and a lot of people disagree with me, and they're wrong. But Hooligan's fine. Hooligan's fine. It's a mediocre track. I think they could have came up with something stronger. I mean, this is Peter had his writing partner, I guess, was Stan Penridge. Is he got his credit on this?
He actually does. He's got his name on this.
Okay, and which is to say, probably Stan Penridge wrote it.
Right, exactly.
Come on, chicken fried roast beef, man.
Apparently, there was, from what I came up with while I was doing my notes on this, is that the engineer Corky Stasiak, who's back,
I was gonna say, he's been on a ton of these.
He claims that there was an issue with the lyrics, that Eddie Kramer thought whatever lyric they were trying to use wasn't good. He didn't like whatever they were trying to do, and I don't know what it was, but Corky Stasiak just kind of tossed off, how about if you tried this? And they used it. Okay. And he doesn't get credit, I don't think, but they used his, he was like, that's my claim to fame. He's like, I added some, impromptu lyrics, and I can't remember where. I think he says, but I can't remember it. I didn't write that down.
It kind of feels like it should have been like a Gene riff at one point, because you know how like Gene songs always have that little bounce to them.
Yeah, you don't know how much this got worked over by the band once they received it. I haven't heard any existing demos of this. Is there one that you're aware of that exists?
No, off the top of my head.
So,
but man, I think this is in. I mean, not that he got a lot of songs to start with, but I think this is in my top 3 favorite Peter songs. I think this suits him better than a Beth. like the lyrics to this song, the vibe to this song, you almost kind of got like the New York street cat kind of vibe from them.
The lyrics are definitely very much Peter's persona.
Like this and Dirty Livin' even. Like I love Dirty Livin'. So it's like I feel like those two suit Peter a lot better than a Baby Driver and a Beth do.
Oh, see, I disagree about the Baby Driver.
I know, I had to throw that in there for you.
That's fine.
You and your thin guitar tones.
Well, the other thing, I think that what kind of sticks in my head from this, even from hearing it as a kid, was this comes from, and I don't know how conscious this was, but it was an era where there was it seems like every era has this sort of nostalgia era. It's like a nostalgia vibe that goes on for time, past, as people come of age or whatever. And in the 70s, everything was, the nostalgia thing was all for the 50s.
Right.
And you had American Graffiti and Happy Days and Sha Na Na and this sort of thing going on. And I think Hooligan kind of patches into that in a certain sense. It has,
I can see that.
It has that sort of a, has that sort of kind of
like a similar feel, kind of like a feel that he would take into his solo record, I think.
Well, it's again, Peter always had more of the R&B influence on stuff like this. So, and that's coming along strong. But again, I wonder how much work went into this with the other band members.
Yeah, it's
Just
interesting.
out of school when I was 22.
Yeah, because he hadn't talked about a whole lot in his book either. He doesn't talk like anything Love Gun related. You don't hear a whole lot about it and through any of the members, recollections or anything like that either.
Well, that's why this is such a curiosity of a record, because it seems like these songs just sort of appear out of nowhere and they didn't really have a lot of staying power outside of Shock Me. Really, Shock Me is in Love Gun.
Love Gun, I Stole Your Love. I mean, there's jams on here without a doubt.
They would come back to I Stole Your Love. I mean, and just considering how big of a record this would prove to be for them,
And then Christine 16 got a breath of second air when they did it on Plaster Caster when they played it on MTV.
Unplugged. Yeah. Well, let's keep rolling here. Let's see. Almost Human.
Yeah, that one's I like it. I love it musically, but it's also like a weird. It's one of the weirder Kiss tunes for me too, especially in this time period.
Yeah, even though I love this record, bottom three. If I can remember correctly, I think my stepfather Eric, this is one of his favorites on the record.
Well, I like the song a lot, and to me, this seems like this could have been the title track. Almost Human just seems like
I can see
very
that
Kiss.
Ooh,
even with the same artwork, it would do.
Oh, of course. And to me, this song would have been better served again under Bob Ezrin.
I think so.
Gene, I think, is playing the guitar on this. It doesn't, Gene's got this kind of slinky feel in his playing. He doesn't play like hard on, full on, whatever, the way the other guys seem to. He just doesn't have that same kind of attack to the.
See, it actually states Gene Simmons for rhythm guitar on Christine 16 and Got Love for Sale.
Okay.
Well, it just still doesn't feel. It doesn't feel like it's Ace or Paul playing the riff on this. I'm almost positive. I would bet money that Gene
totally
has
feel
to be playing
that.
this. But the question here is, that solo part is so unlike anything they've ever done ever.
Was that a reverse tape?
Yeah, it's got all this reverse kind of thing going on,
noise.
And it sounds like they're kind of working off of a bend or I'd hate to say a whammy bar. It just seems like, what kind of guitar would they be using to do that? But they're in the studio. They can do whatever.
Strats.
Yeah, so it may have been done with that. And did Ace do this, or did Gene do this, or did they both do this? And it just frustrates me that there's not a lot of info about that, because it's so weird and so different and so curious that it attracts that attention to me. It's like, who did this and how? What were they doing and how did they put this together?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't stomp like you would think it would, like in a way that God of Thunder does. And it has
got
the potential
like the
to do
conga
that.
drums and everything in it too.
It's got the conga drums. They brought in a guy to play conga drums on it, and it's so.
I actually have his name, Jimmy Moline.
Yeah,
Moline.
So it's I think this is a good song. I like it a lot. I think it would have been better handled with Bob Ezrin. I think he would have pulled more power out of it.
I'd agree with you.
It would have been more, for lack of a better word, monstrous.
Yeah, because it kind of has, like you were talking about, like a God of Thunder aesthetic to it.
And I think had they not come through those channels of Bob Ezrin, again, it's another one of those things. I don't think they would have tried or attempted like the backward solo kind of stuff.
Although that's an Eddie Kramer thing too, though, the backwards solos. That's used a lot on a lot of his records.
Well, he may have suggested it, but they would have been probably less tractable for it if they had not had experience doing it before. It would have been too weird. But
right.
I think this song could have been a lot stronger. It's a great song. It has the potential to be even better, and I think this should have been the title track. But that's just me.
Somebody out there should make an alternate Almost Human album cover.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't have to do anything to change it. I mean, everything works.
Just put the title up in Kiss font.
Yeah. Anything to add to that?
Not really. That's kind of like, I like it. The music's solid on it. It's just a weird one for me, and that's not one that I revisit a lot.
Yeah, no, that's basically the same here for me. Even though it's favorite Kiss record, honestly, this may be my least favorite on the record.
Oh, interesting. Well, let's keep it moving here. We'll go into Plaster Caster.
Another silly love song from Gene in a lot of ways.
I've written in my notes, trite but brilliant.
I really like the song. I think the music's cool. The only thing that ruined it for me was finding out that they never went to her.
Yeah.
Okay, well, no.
We need to get background on the
what's about. You got to get the deep background on that. Deep. So there was a groupie clique out of Chicago that kind of rose to prominence in the very tail end of the 60s, and they were called the Plaster Casters.
Yep.
And it was Cynthia Plastercaster was essentially the lead, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. She has collected
She has a collection.
And if you want to see anyone's love, Gene liked to use the word love as
he really did.
Euphemism for his penis.
Yeah. Anytime you hear Gene Simmons use the word love, he means
talking about his
penis.
dick. So she did plaster casts of rock star penises.
Yeah, and it's like everybody.
Well, it's not everybody, but she
Well,
has a
well,
she has a
everybody
collection. But the one person that she did not do, nor did she ever intend to do, nor did she have any interest in ever collecting, was Gene Simmons, and she was not at all flattered by this song.
I can imagine.
Because she felt like Gene was advertising. Or
Well-
I don't know if she thought Gene or just Kiss in general were advertising, like, hey, and she's like, no. She's come to like the song. I think she has a greater appreciation now for it, but at the time, I don't think she was at all impressed by it.
Gee, I can only imagine why.
Right.
But all that aside, yes, they're singing about getting their love plaster casted. When you're a little kid, you don't know that,
Right.
Their heart.
It's like, none of that makes any sense when you're a kid. So this is, as a kid, this was kind of a nonsensical song, but it's a great, again, it's Gene doing pop music, and that's the strength of Kiss, particularly that is lost as we'll move into the 80s, is their ability to be great pop songwriters. They're not heavy metal at all.
No. Quit calling them a metal band.
They were not a heavy metal band. And they were a pop band. They were a hard pop rock, whatever you want to call it, And this song is one of those great illustrations of it. And they were very, very good at it. Even if they wrote stupid lyrics musically,
Just getting harder.
but just the melody of it. I'm just saying,
You're still singing it for days afterwards.
Yeah, this will stick in your brain. It's very bubble gum.
It's in my head right now.
And it's put together well. Again, the demo is virtually identical.
Yep.
And kind of unremarkable in that sense. I think that in this case, the album track exceeds the demo, whereas I think the Love Gun demo exceeds the album track, kind of a thing.
I'd agree.
But it's a great song, and with apologies to Cynthia Plastercaster, because there was a million teenage boys out there that just did not know.
Right.
And as they grew up to be a million middle-aged adults, they all go,
See my love, just ask her.
Ask her.
How do we get in on that? So now we get to the end of the album.
A cover.
And this is...
Gender swapped cover.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, this was a weird close. Always a weird closer for me that they made the choice to do this.
So why is that, real quick?
Because
well, what's the track?
Oh, Then She Kissed Me.
Which is the old...
it's like an old Phil Spector production.
Yeah.
I forget who the band was that originally did it.
Was it the Ronettes?
That was not going to be my
first guess. You know what? I meant to
guess.
write that down. I'm almost positive it was them, but
yeah,
I might be wrong.
But yeah, to answer Alex's question is that when I found out that... first time I heard this song when I was...
Crystals.
Crystals did it, okay. Well, yeah, okay.
The first time
I should know that, and I'm ashamed I don't.
But yeah, the first time I heard this song was in the movie Goodfellas, where Henry Hill takes his date through the restaurant, and he's kind of, they're going through the kitchen and all that, and they're playing that song in the background.
Is that the song they use in the track? Yeah, that's a famous scene because it's such a long tracking scene. But okay, at the end of the day, though, Kiss is doing... It turned from, of course, the gender bend. It went from he to she. This makes no sense to me.
I know. First off,
so why not?
Well, it's not bad, but it's not good either.
Right.
Apparently, Jailhouse Rock was considered too. For some reason, Paul had it in his head that they needed to do a cover on this album. I don't understand why they felt the need. I mean, knowing that we know now, there was a wealth of demos out there for them to pull from. What made them feel they had to do a cover song, and why? And apparently Jailhouse Rock was probably the only other seriously considered idea from the notes I've got from what I found. That may or may not be true.
Too. That's an odd choice too.
Yeah, but neither one of these seem to be.
But why does this song not really make any sense to you for them to cover?
Because it just okay. It just seems like it's a stretch. You're doing that. You have to go to the stretch to change the he to the she. It doesn't feel like anything that Kiss does.
No,
I could see Kiss even at this point having the brass to go out and attempt to do a Beatles cover for that matter. It just, or to go for something like when they bastardized the Hunter. Certainly they could do something else along those lines. It just, and instead you've got this kind of dopey kind of pop song with this kind of, schmaltzy, syrupy, kind of quasi-romantic lyric that doesn't seem to fly in league with their machismo chest beating, I'm a stud, look at my pecker and worship,
I get that, but let's also look at things that previously happened on this album and albums before. So we've been praising them for bringing in a lot of R&B and doo-wop. I mean, this isn't too far connected from that, especially the original. When it goes down to being a lot more lovey-dovey and, instead of, vibrato, look at my big dick. I mean, sure, Peter had Beth, but we can even go outside of that and look at Hard Luck Woman and, stuff like that where they've also touched on elements of being a bit more romantic and lovey rather than just big machismo stuff. For me, and then Phil Spector being such a large name in the music world at that time, and then also working with Bob Ezrin, the more I kind of started thinking about it, with branding, Then She Kissed.
That was going to be my next point.
Yeah. I feel like it absolutely made sense for that thought process.
Well, you also wonder if there wasn't any kind of consideration going into that as it being a potential single. It was never released as a single.
You're right.
But if you've got something that had already had a proven track record as being a hit before, it stands to reason, well, maybe we could do it again.
Yeah, I don't know. Just to me, this just felt, but no, I don't know. Just to me, this felt like right in line with the other pop sensibilities that they have been kind of showing off. And in retrospect, just kind of really sitting and thinking on it, I've grown to like this cover and this song a little bit more than some of the other stuff that they've wound up doing.
It's fine, but again, still feels like an odd choice for me, especially since they chose to do a cover on this album too.
Yeah, I will say the fact Kiss doing a cover at all is very bizarre.
Well, they had done, they were forced into doing the cover,
Time.
Kissin' Time on the first album. It just seems like.
Were they running out of ideas? Because
no, clearly not.
Clearly they weren't, but it just feels that way because
Love Gun, like you were saying, is the hunter, and
to me, this entire album signifies a shift towards their imminent demise. Like, when you start getting to that point where you're like, okay, we got to go outside now and we'll find this song and we'll do it. It's kind of a thing. It shows sort of a lack of confidence maybe in your own material, or maybe it shows just overt confidence that they're just like, we can flippantly do this classic song. But
it's a shift for better or worse.
I don't think it's strong. I don't care for it. I
I'm
used
not
to love it when I was a little
great.
kid. I'm not going to lie. When I was like 9 years old or whatever, I'd listen to it on my little Fisher Price stereo, and it was great. But as I got older, I'm just kind of like, and they don't really bring anything to it.
No, there's nothing really new
that
really
makes
with
it sound, and it doesn't. And going back to my complaint about the production of the entire album, if there's going to be anything that really starkly stands off that fact, is the
their attempt at a Phil Spector production.
Doing a Phil Spector song, and it doesn't have the Phil Spector production.
Yeah, in no way am I saying this is even like in my top 20 favorites.
Because Phil Spector killed it.
Oh,
he martyred it.
But yeah, no,
that was just too easy.
I know it.
Even I groaned on the inside.
Yeah, it's not even a top 20, but I've come to respect it a little bit more. Where I had the reverse when I first heard it as a kid. I was like, "What the fuck is this pansy bullshit?" But then as I've gotten older, I was like, "Okay, I can at least see where the thought process was here."
It's not ineptly handled at all. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying.
No.
They do a really excellent job the way the whole thing is constructed, and but it sounds like an anomaly on this record to me. It's like, for all of their kind of we've talked about the pop hooks and their ability to do this sort of stuff. This just doesn't have that same feel, and it just feels awkward, and it feels like tacked on to me, much as the same way as Kissin' Time did, which was literally tacked on to the first album.
Yeah.
But they had the deluxe edition that came out several years back, and it's got some demos on it that were, I guess, of that era.
Yeah, a lot of it from Gene, or probably like the originals that didn't make the album were all from Gene.
Do you want to talk about those songs?
Yeah, we can talk about it a little bit. My overall take is I'd heard some of these before, just in different little bootleg compilations and such like that. But honestly, none of the unreleased songs really grabbed me except Reputation, but we'll get to that one.
Well, so we would just hit them kind of chronologically as they appear on the record. It's, I guess, Much Too Soon was the first.
Yeah. Kind of forgetful for me.
I mean, they're all, none of them.
I just got a question here.
Yeah.
Given the lyrics, what's with Gene and little girls? What is going on here?
Good question. It's not like it's a time
Much Too Soon
like
is
that.
very,
It's like he knows, but
well, Cap should know
the
about
lyric
phrasing.
is almost comical. I mean, it really is. I listen to it and I can't help but snicker. It's like, what are you doing, dude?
It's like,
I mean, really? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a fixation here, man, and it's a little creepy now. It's getting a little beyond creepy, but I mean,
read that love letter that's on Alive.
But otherwise, this has a very, it's got the Beatle vibe to me.
Yeah.
There's something about the whole construction of it, the delivery of the vocal,
all that bounce to it as well.
It's got that weird lyric about, they'll look her over, they'll give her a quarter. But I mean, they're giving but it's much too soon.
Much too soon.
Much too soon.
At least Gene. Thanks for letting thanks for letting us know.
But to me, this is a stronger track than Got Love for Sale or than She Kissed Me. It could have been a better fit on the album.
I don't know. Maybe if it had a little bit more work with it, just musically, it just felt so boring to me.
I think, he's leaning a little too hard, I think, into his Beatle territory. It would have been late era Beatles. When I say Beatles, I don't mean,
Say before it becomes a Kiss song, it becomes a Gene Simmons demo with everything Gene wants first.
Yeah, I don't know how they would have handled it. I think of these other demos we'll talk about here, I think there's other ones that would have fit even better, including Reputation.
Yeah, we can skip over Plaster Caster. It basically doesn't deviate. But Reputation, I thought that one was pretty cool. It's got a little keyboard or piano bit in it. Pretty catchy chorus, too. That I know I've got a reputation.
It's unrealized potential here. It could have been a very strong track. I think once it was presented to the band and Kissized, I guess, with the other guys, it could have turned into something a little different. Not much. It didn't have to be. Just like the other albums or other tracks that we saw that didn't go through any grand change, but this could have gotten a little bit more muscled up.
Yeah, kind of has a similar setup to say Radioactive or something like that.
I'm trying to figure out, listening to this, if any of it got recycled into other stuff, because
nothing obvious.
I don't hear anything. I don't hear anything that I can associate with any other song, and
maybe like the vibe and beat Christine 16, because the main riff is or at least at the beginning is the doom.
Yeah, but
it always kind of
it's got the piano thing that he likes. I still don't associate it with that song though.
I will say though that I think that song is Unrealized Potential, and we didn't discuss it leading into Destroyer. But between Alive and Destroyer, they cut a demo for a song called "Don't You Hesitate."
Yeah.
That song I think is really good. Unreleased potential.
It could have, and it makes me wonder why these songs never survived the process,
because Paul said so.
Don't you hesitate.
But then you got I Know Who You Are, which we know will be resurrected on Gene's solo album as Living in Sin.
Yeah.
Is it better? Well, we can discuss that, I guess, once we get to that album. But we need to check mark it and remember that it exists.
I'm sitting there going I got to listen to Gene's record again.
Hey, it's better than Peter's.
Well,
I got to re-listen to that one too.
So that pretty much covers the album, I guess.
And then we've got if we're talking about the deluxe, they rounded off with 3 live in 77 tracks.
Yeah,
And I put that in air quotes because I'm sorry, listening back to it, the vocal may be right, the drum, and the guitars may all still be original. Those drums sound reprocessed. Like, it sounds like they re-triggered the snare and kick. It sounds very bizarre. Not like any other stuff they've got.
They don't sound like multi-track recordings to me. They sound like they're recorded off of ambient mics in the room, because
you can still record over drums with that. It sounds like they just added drum samples on, like those.
I was about to ask,
the Alive 96 97 tour, how Peter's drums had that certain sampled sound to it. It sounded like they just kind of played some drums over top the new recordings and just beefed it up. It sounds weird.
There's a ton of live reissues that have been like that. That Cheap Trick one that just came out did the same thing.
Oh, did they?
Mm-hmm. I like the sound of those tracks, though. I think I like that ambient quality. It's different.
It's not it's not overproduced.
Yeah, but before they go on tour, in the process of recording, I've got the date as May 25th. They go to Buffalo, New York, and add the blood to the red ink for their upcoming Marvel comic.
Yes.
Now the direction is shifting.
Well, they're getting and this is a pretty cool thing, I think. I mean, it again contextualized only as Kiss. Kiss could do this. Aerosmith couldn't have had a comic book.
No.
And that's not a slight on Aerosmith at all.
But they were just a rock band.
Well,
they could have a roller coaster.
You know what I mean.
But, they also had a pinball machine eventually too, blah, 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 whatever. But
right.
It's not, they didn't have the same vibe, the same feel. Kiss were tailor-made for a comic book. I didn't, at the time, it was a deal to be able to even find it, because I don't remember ever seeing it anywhere. But neither here nor there. They obviously famously advertised that the comic was printed in real Kiss blood because they had their blood, in
vials
drawn
and
and
whatnot.
put it in
Lovely.
vials and dropped it into the red ink. Depending on the story, again, the myth might exceed the reality. I'm sure they did that.
The point of this series, question
Obviously,
everything.
there's footage of them doing it. But apparently that red ink did not wind up in that comic book. It actually wound up in a
Sports Illustrated.
Sports Illustrated.
What?
But
So
actually,
as
there's
legend has it, is the batches got switched or swapped in the
just the
plant.
production schedule got changed or whatever.
Someone
didn't know
didn't write
this.
the right memo, and that red got shipped off somewhere. And I think the reason they were able to figure out that happened is because the paper that's used in like magazines and stuff, especially at that time, was a little different than what was used in comic books. Comic book pages were a lot more,
Newsprint.
more of a newsprint, where magazines, stuff had a little bit more of that glossier and
slick.
nicer stuff.
Yeah.
So when the red mixed with the blood started getting printed on that nicer paper, it started to smear and discolor. Whereas if it was on more of that newspaper stock paper, it wouldn't have done as much. And I think
I've
that's
never
even
heard
how
that,
they.
but I mean, I guess that's possible. I don't know.
Just
But
got Kiss blood all over O.J. Simpson or whoever the fuck in 1977
here's the other thing that's
They would
interesting
only
to
be
note.
happy if it was the swimsuit edition.
with Christy Brinkley or some shit.
It's also, this is the last time they would appear in public in their Destroyer costumes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you look at the footage and photos of this, Gene is wearing his Alive boots with the Destroyer top, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, they're wearing almost
He's
like a
not
mixed
wearing
match of stuff.
He's not wearing the traditional Destroyer boots, but that's the last time they would. So that's how fast the cycle of that costuming and stuff goes, because now they're getting fitted for new outfits, for new costumes,
And it shows on the cover as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, as I've said so many times before, this is my absolute favorite era of their costumes. Specifically, they had two versions of it, or at least Ace had two versions of his costume.
No, Gene had two.
Did he?
as
Okay.
well.
Yeah, but the first version of those costumes were my favorite, especially Ace's, because Ace's touring costume, the material that was used was almost kind of like a. It was like a woven silver material.
Yeah, that's what he used in the touring version. Yeah, but the
then
other one's
the photo was almost like a slick silver,
Yeah,
kind
it
of
was
like
very
what the
smooth or whatever, yeah.
almost like what the piping on
Yeah.
the Destroyer costume looked like. It was that all over, so it was like really flashy
Apparently,
and bright,
yeah,
shiny, and
that
it
was-
just looks so cool.
It wasn't roadworthy though. It wasn't.
It was- it would crinkle.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, they said it would, like, even after photo shoots, it would crinkle so much that it would look like crap by the next day, and they'd have to do like a replacement armband or some shit for
And
them.
they went to the same guy that did the Destroyer cover too, right?
Yep, they
Yeah.
did.
Ken Kelly, again, iconic cover art.
And
that's-
costume designer, essentially.
that those two covers just work so well for them.
I agree. I totally agree.
Those are, we can debate, but those are arguably the two best album covers they ever had.
And
Love
fans-
Gun makes a great poster too.
Yeah,
It looks so good on
all
the
of it
wall.
looks great. Now the girls, if you notice, the girls that surround them, they're all wearing whiteface, and they all look identical.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. Because they are all identical. That he modeled, the model for that was Ken Kelly's wife.
Oh, okay.
And
Makes
if you
sense.
do notice on the left side, one has no body.
Oh, because it's almost unfinished, isn't it?
Oh, it's not even just unfinished, just a floating head.
Disembodied head.
Yeah, it's just a floating head. I've got the photo up here. Folks at home are, pull out your record collection and take a look. But yeah, at the very bottom, look at the head on the far right, on the left side. It's just floating there.
Well, that's
There's
all-
nothing.
That's
Floating
all right.
kiss head.
Floating
You're
little
just
lady
getting
head.
you're getting the idea, though, that,
You don't have to
I remember
discredit it. I'm
studying.
just-
I remember studying that cover when I was a little kid because there was something a little naughty about it.
yeah.
It looks like,
It's like
Sex dungeon.
You can see their nipples.
Well, that cover That cover too, like,
but
fans that-
like poking through the material, whatever they're wearing.
But that's one of those covers that Kiss haters talk about too. We're like, the cover looks like it's the most metal thing ever, and then we get "I Stole Your Love."
Right, I understand that. I've had that conversation with people before, and I had the same kind of reaction when Alice Cooper made his comeback in the '80s, and I was a young teenager, not really aware of too much Alice Cooper. And going and trying to discover Alice Cooper, and the first album I go into is School's Out.
Yeah.
Right.
And by the time you get to the end of School's Out, you're just like, what in the fuck am I listening to? And now it's my favorite Alice Cooper record.
Interesting. All right.
But as a teenager, I was expecting like some, I was expecting Black Sabbath or something.
There's a lot going on in that School's Out record.
Yeah, Alice Cooper in general, you get and this is true for Kiss, you get this sort of, hard, almost, horror movie, almost demonic kind of image. And then you get these pop songs that are kind of,
the kind of
bouncing and but to me at the time, I didn't know any better. So I grew up with that. So it made perfect sense to me all along.
Right.
Yeah.
That's like the one album, that and Destroyer, probably the two that I hear a lot from like haters that are like, oh, it doesn't match the art that they do, but they love Molly Hatchet and shit too, and that's the worst example of that kind of thing.
Yes.
Well, going back to the comic book, they had already made their first appearance in Howard the Duck. There is a Howard the Duck number 12. There's a very brief appearance of Kiss in that.
Interesting.
And then they pop up again in the following issue. These came out in May and June, and then the Kiss comic came out in September of 1977.
They couldn't get the Incredible Hulk. They got Howard the Duck.
I think, I'm not sure I'm not sure what the story is behind that, but I think the writer for Howard the Duck, who I think was Steve Gerber, did that kind of, he just freelanced that in. But I'm sure by that point that the Kiss comic was already into play.
Right, so they had to tie it in somehow.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. Well, it doesn't really tie in.
Oh, okay.
It's just it's like a fever dream that Howard the Duck has, if I remember right. It's something to do with that. I used to have that issue. I'm not a comic book guy at all. I bought it because I knew that was the one.
The Kiss one, yeah.
I have no idea what I've done with that. It's long gone.
I actually still have one upstairs.
Oh well, then where'd you get it?
From Eric.
That's probably the one I have. There we go. Now I know where it probably wound up.
So it's probably taking
I probably gave it to Eric, and Eric probably gave it to you. Okay.
Well, hey, Russ, I have your comic book.
There you go.
You're welcome to it. So this album is released and ships platinum, the first album that Casablanca ships platinum.
I was going to say, did it return platinum?
And no, it didn't return platinum. I don't even
Not
know
until the next year
I
of
think
albums.
this album, this is an era where we really don't know true actual album sales, because it was enough to ship platinum that, if they ship, whatever they ship is what the RIAA would count as an album sale, even though it didn't necessarily sell. So they got their platinum record award for this.
Right.
It peaks at number 4 on Billboard, but we also know now, courtesy of Larry Harris, that they were heavily involved in manipulating those chart positions. Payola was still a thing to a degree. So we really don't know how well this record sold. It doesn't really matter. It certainly left a huge impression. This is the beginning of, like you said, what would become the Super Kiss era. This is this is the beginning of their biggest point in their entire career. As big as they've ever enjoyed any success ever, nothing compares to what's going to follow over the next 2 years. 77 is just so important, and this album is so important as really the kickoff for this. They've been building and building, and they've enjoyed major success with Alive. Their first real top 10 hit with Beth. But they seem to still just be bubbling under the surface. I mean, and I don't want to use the word or the term also ran, but they're in the also ran to a certain degree. But they're about to break through in a very significant way that's going to permeate culture in a whole different level. They're going to become much more than just a mere rock and roll band. But before they get there, they have to once again hit the road.
And they go on, they embark on probably like their biggest tour up to this point too, right?
Actually, it's
a pretty short tour.
It's a very short tour. There's only like 32 dates on this.
But don't they?
And it's primarily in Canada.
But don't they have like their own plane at this point and everything too?
No, that was the episode previous, wasn't it? Where we discussed the private jet thing. Because that was the Rock and Roll Over heading to Japan.
Well, that was just one for that Japan trip.
Okay.
I don't know how they're traveling from show to show on this. It's possible they might have gotten a plane charter for this. I'm not sure.
This is back when bands could get like their own logo on like a 747 or something like that.
The plane of that era was called the Starship, and and it was owned by a teen idol from the late 60s, early 70s named Bobby Sherman.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know that, but it was an investment he made, I guess, via his management or whatever, and they leased that plane out to bands. The band that made that plane famous was Led Zeppelin.
That's what I think of when I think of like bands with their own planes.
But
and
Alice Cooper used it. The Allman Brothers used it.
Did the Rolling Stones use it too?
I think the Stones used it. I don't think that's the plane that's in the infamous Cocksucker Blues movie.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it's not.
I didn't realize it was that famous plane that you see in all of those photos was rented out by
no one owned that thing. Right.
It's all vibrato.
It was owned by Bobby Sherman and I guess some other investors, and they leased it out. That plane was going to get scrapped after I think it was like 77 was the last year that plane was used, so they wouldn't have used it on this tour. I'd be, and I think if they had ever used the Starship, we would know about it.
Right.
But this tour featured Cheap Trick, and then at the very tail end for maybe about 4 shows, Styx joined on.
Yeah, and but this was the tour that broke Cheap Trick in an important way. Of course, it would take another year when the
Live at Budokan would come out.
But to me, this is like the perfect pairing. This is like peanut butter and jelly. I mean, how can you not?
All these pop songs.
This would have been like, this to me would have been the ultimate time to see them, because
that would be the Time Machine tour for me for sure.
You get a really great strong opening act, and then you get
the greatest show on earth at that point.
So, this is an incredible tour, and
everybody had. You still look at Cheap Trick's online social media pages these days today, and they're still like hyping up that tour and recounting how great that experience was for them.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And again, this is a short tour. It's only 32 dates, and it's primarily in Canada and the American West Coast. There's no East Coast dates on this. They don't play Madison Square Garden or any of the, or the Spectrum or any of the East Coast strongholds. They do play. Well, I've got some notable dates put down as like August 16th, obviously 77, Elvis Presley dies.
Yeah. And
they dedicate Rock and Roll All Night to him. I've read in other places that they played Jailhouse Rock, but there's a bootleg of that show exists, and they do not play it. And it's also, they are, I guess, preparing for what will be a live 2, because as we talked about before, they recorded the shows in Tokyo the previous spring with Eddie Kramer, and Eddie Belandas, I guess that's how you pronounce his name, records his intro for Alive 2 in a bathroom at the Cow Palace. And they don't use his entire intro because they didn't feel like he said Kiss forcefully enough. Yep. So Gene says the Kiss part. But anyway, we'll get to that in the Alive 2 episode. Record,
because I was going to say the Alive 2 tour is what actually wound up being a lot bigger, and that's where they hit a lot more dates.
Yeah, it seems like I don't know. that they're aiming towards this in a particular way, or if it's just the way, again, things are moving so fast. And it cycles so quickly. But August 26th, 27th, and 28th in the Forum in LA is where they ostensibly record Alive 2. And we'll go into greater detail on that in the next episode. A week later, not even a week later, they're at the Houston Summit, which is, of course, one of their more widely bootlegged videos that exist.
Yep.
The reason for that is because the Houston Summit had an in-house recording system that they projected camera system that they projected on the screens above the stage in the arena. And there was a couple of arenas that had that in-house, and that's why you see kind of a greater amount of bootlegs for that. There's a lot of Live at Houston for bands.
Yep.
Journey has one. There's a P-Funk one.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking
there's
about
a bunch
it.
out there because they had that feed. Same with
Budokan even.
Budokan didn't have a live feed, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
They just had those professionally filmed by a company over there. But Cobo Hall had one.
Kobo, that's what.
And then
See Houston, and then
it was Largo, Maryland, Capitol Center, and so you get a lot from there too. But those were winding down at the end of that tour. Their last date is September 5th in Fort Worth, and again, 32 dates on this. It just seems kind of odd to me that we're talking about this as the kickoff for their biggest era, and they've done this really kind of short tour in what I would call B markets, Canada.
Well, it is interesting. So, I mean, if we want to look at it from that aspect, they kick off July 8th and September 5th, and that's their Love Gun run. And then so
it's basically the month of. Was it the whole summer? What do you got the first date as?
July 8th.
Yeah, I've got it in Nova Scotia.
And then I've got Halifax July 8th.
Yeah,
in the Halifax one,
Halifax is in Nova Scotia.
Okay, sorry. And then ending in September 5th at Fort Worth.
Right.
But then Alive 2 immediately picks up November 15th. So they only have like 2 months off before they're right back on the road November 15th in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they run that all the way until February. Then they hop back on over to Japan for March and April. I know we're jumping way ahead, but you know what I'm saying, though. So even though Love Gun Tour itself may have not done a lot, they really push it hard going all the way into
it's
78.
essentially the same tour, and it probably would be kind of remiss to look at it any other way. But this is the beginning of the era, the prime era, and we're going to see the influx of toys and pinball and
egos.
And episodes are about to get fun up in here.
Yes, they are.
And I really think this is the beginning of the end for them. I think, this is the last album that they record.
All four do it.
With all four on it.
Yeah.
And working together. I think, and again, I think, this is, oddly enough, this is Peter Criss's
swan song with the band.
Kind of, and also, but it's also his strongest studio drumming.
Yeah.
I mean, he's doing some really cool stuff on this record. It's totally overlooked.
And there's a lot of some of the best highlights of Ace's guitar playing on this album too.
It's a strong record. I just feel like it could have been stronger. I just think if it had that same power and presence and punch of Rock and Roll Over, it could have been an even better record. That's of course obviously just my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's still great as it exists as it is. It's a bona fide classic now.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So this is
so like a 8 out of 10 for me too. It's I don't dislike any of the songs on the record. I agree with you on Rock and Roll Over being stronger, but Love Gun definitely has its own charm, like all my favorite Kiss records do too.
Yeah. Well, it just feels more bubblegum compared to Rock and Roll Over to me. And I don't say that in a bad way.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I have an affinity for really good, strong, well-done bubblegum pop from the 70s.
And even though it's probably number one favorite, I'll probably give it 8.5 out of 10. It's like, I don't think there's been a 10 out of, I know you probably think Rock and Roll Over is a 10 out of 10, but in my opinion, I don't think Kiss has had a perfect 10 out of 10 record where every single song is, oh my God, if you don't like this, something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
I feel that there's a handful of records I have that are like that, but I don't think Kiss is really
That's a rare thing in any band, though. I mean,
it is.
It's hard for me to pick an album that's
a short list
really
anyway.
strong. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but that's why I can't just give it a straight 10 out of 10 with as much as I've been gushing over it. I simply can't, but no, super strong record for me. It's just, I don't know. I feel there may be a little bit of nostalgia connected to it because like certain like cool moments in my life, I feel like I was listening to that record a lot and stuff like that. So it's like maybe there's a little bit of that, but I don't know. When I take the nostalgia lenses off, I pop in the headphones or I turn up the stereo and fucking I Stole Your Love kicks on. It's like,
Oh, it's a great song. I love it.
Nothing better, man.
And if it sounds like I'm crumbing on
you're
it,
not. I just have to give this album so much love because I don't think I feel like this toward any other Kiss record.
I gotta note, for the record, my perspective is a little bit different because, I remember this as a new album, and I was, I don't know, I might, this is a long, long time ago, so it may not have been their brand new album at that point, but I think it was probably their most recent album because I came aboard in that 77, 78 era. And I had friends that lived down the street, and across the street were these girls that were the daughters of my second grade teacher. My second grade teacher lived across the street from our friends of mine at the time, and they're the ones that had that record, and they brought it over, and I still remember that. I can see it in my head. I can just remember, that's the kind of stuff that makes this stuff kind of special for me.
Oh yeah,
because I tie it to these memories and these moments and these occurrences, and you're just like, I don't know how to relate that in an era where, where people younger than us even never have known an era where there was no internet, where there was no way to access information so easily. I don't think that Kiss could have, maintained those personas in such secrecy without people, they wouldn't, the press wouldn't have played along with it like they did then. But, we'll talk more about this as we go into, the next few episodes. I think are going to get pretty exciting.
Oh yeah.
So hopefully you guys are enjoying the ride, and we hope that you'll continue along with us for this ride. For Alex and Cap, I'm Russ, and this is No Time to Turn, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. Please insert another coin by supporting the show for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/somethinggoodnetwork.